the one thing is people too often think because they've sold something once in their life that if they get their real estate license that they can be a really good real estate agent, or because they talk or they're really good talkers that they can be really good real estate agents, and though that's not the case.
Welcome to the next episode of Over a Pint. This week, I'm excited to have good friend, one of the first probably non-RE/MAX people I really kind of connected with once I started Just Sell Homes and got out of the RE/MAX world, is Nelson Goulart, who owns Better Homes and Gardens Signature Service.
Yes.
And so I'm really excited to have you on. So maybe a quick intro for anyone who might not know who you are.
And it's funny that you say about RE/MAX is because I was 16 years with RE/MAX. So when I came out, we've both been through the system, and so we've got a lot in common. I started in 1989 as a real estate agent, and the markets quickly tanked at that stage for 4 years.
Perfect.
So you get to experience a declining market over a period of 5 years, and actively worked as a salesperson until about 2005. Then became involved with opening a brokerage, managing. Then when that changed, I was part of the management team around 2007, 2008 to bring the brand to Canada. And after going through all these levels of agent, broker, and even part of the working with a major brand like Realogy and Better Homes and Gardens, I found that my sweet spot after this illustrious career of 30 years in the business, that where I find my passion and where I really enjoy my sweet spot of what I do every day is working with our agents and helping to groom them to success and working one-on-one with them and developing that. And not very exciting, but it is what it is.
I'm curious, I always wonder this because like you always hear that there's not as much money on the brokerage side as there are on the like being an agent, assuming you're successful as an agent. But like what made you like one, did you know that like people talk about that a lot before you became a broker? What made you want to originally become a broker when you were an agent?
Okay. So when the reason for me becoming a broker was I was seeing so many people come through the industry and failing. They come into the offices that you work at and they come through the systems and they go through the training and they would fail. Within 2 years, we know that 80% of the people fail, yet everybody has the best training, yet the failure rate is across the board. So for me, I wanted it to create like a type of boutique type of environment, smaller to mid-size, not small, but mid-size to larger. And I consider mid-size about 60 agents where we are right now, that we could work on one-on-one with them through coaching, mentoring, and truly supporting the agent, not by delegating them to other trainers or courses, although we work with some of the best in the industry, but having a hands-on approach to their success individually. And it's worked out very well for us. We've seen the success of our agents as a high percentage of them producing, especially when we compare them to other offices. So I'm very proud of that, but that kind of drew me onto why I wanted to be a broker, is to make effective change at that grassroots level and stop this churn and burn mentality that's in the industry.
Were there any like specific gaps you found? Because like you're saying, like everyone says they have the best training, you want to bring your own. Like, did you find there was like specific gaps that you saw they were missing out on with agents who were kind of having that burn in the industry?
Well, yeah, it's actually became quite evident very quickly, but it's the difficult one. That gap is the difficult one to correct, because it involves actual engagement by the broker and the agent, one-on-one, to monitor and to support. That door has to truly be open to help that agent if they have questions. So sometimes they'll come in with one question and they leave with 2 or 3 other things that they weren't even considering when they're leaving. But that takes a tremendous amount of time and effort, and to work one-on-one with those agents. What we found made a big difference in ours is because I've always believed in coaching. I was with Mike Ferry coaching in the 90s, and then with Richard Robbins Group International over there in the early 2000s. What I created was an not individual, because one-on-ones we can't provide, but we created great group coaching. And it was through the group coaching that I kind of discovered the amazing synergy of collaboration. When you got 4 people in a group, everybody knows what each other's goals are. Everybody's rowing in the right direction. And sometimes the right solutions don't necessarily come from me. They may come from the group itself in hearing what each other are going through it. And the part that really amazes me now is that we've now switched all of those meetings to Zoom. So now we no longer get together in the company. They're all done on Zoom. They're recorded. They can check them out. If there's something they missed, they can go back to listen to it. If they missed a session, they're not getting a summary. But why is it important? Because that's where the grassroots of the success comes from. Everybody's got listing presentations. Everybody's got scripts and dialogues. Everybody's getting the same results.
So do you like things like Zoom, like how much of this will you keep? Like assuming that everything, there's a vaccine, everything's back to completely normal, whatever that ends up being, but virus is gone, environment. What do you see you guys keeping versus like what you have now versus when that opens up again, how you'll adapt?
I think Zoom and Zoom type of products have elbowed their way onto the table of education. There's no doubt about it that it will play a part. How much of that will be remains to be seen. But what we've even in my discussions with the brand and seeing how the results have been so far, Zoom is a great product for short types of training, an hour. We know that people's attention spans onto watching a computer screen for 6 or 7 hours for 3 days, the way some programs are designed, they won't sit there. And we've seen that people start turning off their camera like 2 hours in, and then they're gone for an hour and they come back. And so it doesn't fit that part of it, although some of those courses are now being redesigned for the online world. But you're still going to have some courses that are going to have to be delivered in 1 or 2 full days. But the other things will now quickly be dealt with like Zoom. And for me, I've got agents between here and Niagara Falls. So this is a wonderful tool to reach all of them, and they love it. And they're now using it effectively in their presentations, their listing presentations, their meetings with clients. I was doing recruiting with Zoom all through COVID. There were people who still wanted to talk to us. It was we didn't meet in person, but we did presentations and meetings online, kind of coffee talks to kind of get to know each other and see if there was some commonality there.
So what do you like, were there any differences in why people were moving brokerages during COVID versus like normal times?
I think one thing that came to light, and it was one of the first people that walked in the first week, he had met with me like a month before, and you know our office, so we're full paperless. For us to switch to a virtual environment was very easy. Our front desk systems, our e-transaction systems, the back end, everything was set up. So there was no disruption to our business. And we went to an auto attendance system for our phone calls so that the agents would get the recordings of the messages directly. So for us, it was good. But the very first person who joined at the time came in because he said, you know what, can I join now? And I said, sure. And he goes, I said, why now? I said, you weren't going to come for a couple months, you were thinking. And he goes, because they're lost over there. And I said, what do you mean they're lost over there? He goes, there's nobody in the office. They've shut down everything completely. There's no communications. I've been left adrift, and I want the systems and tools that you have because that'll remain connected. So, and then a couple other people started looking at us, and I guess word has gotten around. We've hired a few people, partially because of technology, but also partially because of the one-on-one and helping them grow.
I know you're involved a lot in you're involved at the brand level, you do a lot in organized real estate. Obviously you're involved a lot on your end. Like, what do you think, like, and let's say it's an agent not in an area where you have an office, what should they look for in a broker and a brokerage?
Well, each different models have their pros and their cons, right? And it's one thing that our industry has brought up all kinds of different models to appeal to different people, right? If you're an experienced agent, it'll depend on the systems and tools that you may need. Now, if you've been doing this for 20, 30 years successfully, your need may be something else than that agent who's starting out new to the business and, you know, and is doing 2 deals a year and is barely surviving, but wants to stay in the business. But I think Outside of all of the things, brands are great. But I think the best thing that we're seeing brands evolve into is more the tools and systems that they provide to the broker. But if the broker doesn't translate those tools and systems down to the agents, then it's null and void, right? So again, it involves rolling up the sleeves, speaking with the agents, having the one-on-ones, laying out a very actionable plan for the next 6 to 8 months, that they have to do the groundwork on. And it takes a lot of work. I've had people come from other companies who've been there for a while, and it could take 2 to 3 months just to lay out some of the foundation. And that's working on it every week on things that they need to do. And, I'm still amazed how many people don't have a website. I'm still amazed how many people don't have an organized database. And they're always shocked when I say an agent is only as good as his database. And if you don't have one, then you're going to struggle to do business, or you're always going to be looking for new business. I'm surprised how many people don't have a CRM. And I think the wisdom and the age and experience of a broker who's been active in the business can help that agent go through selection of CRMs, creating those databases, selection of websites to get up and running, their online social media. Like, it's great to bring in companies like yourself because you guys are great at what you do. I heard accolades this week alone from some of your clients, but you're in a support role. The core role should always be the broker at the ground level in the grassroots.
Yeah, it's always interesting because there are so many things we do that they come to us for because their brokerages is not providing it.
Yeah, you hear that often. That is a very common conversation, is that they'll list out really quickly what they're not getting. And it's like, okay, so let's get to work on those things. But let's also give understanding that the things that need to be done involve a lot of work.
Yeah.
So yes, that broker or that manager or that trainer in that company has to put it in, but that agent has to be prepared. There's nothing easy about this business. And if I said, the one thing is, people too often think because they've sold something once in their life, that if they get their real estate license, that they can be a really good real estate agent, or because they talk, or they're really good talkers, that they can be really good real estate agents. And that's not the case.
That's why I actually had that conversation with a potential client this morning, because I'd say maybe 70% of sales calls we hear the same line from every agent, which is, if you can just get me on the phone with someone, I can close them.
Yeah, that's not true.
Great. I mean, immediately my response is yes, I hear that all the time. The stats prove that's not true.
Yes, it is. It's true. You're 100% correct.
Everyone said, everybody thinks that about themselves.
Well, and it's funny because I've kind of come to this conclusion with the conversation and the words we use. I often tell our agents, you make money and a living with the words you use, but you also lose money with the words you use. So if you're not selective about how you phrase conversations, how you guide a conversation, how you close or open conversations, you can be giving up a lot of business. And real estate has always been different. That's why I think it's been so slow to adapt to all the changes in the industry, because there are certain things that are involved. But I have seen, like in the 90s when I was in real estate, you would be looking at, we thought it was atrocious that 60% of the business was done by 40% of the agents. Yeah. And we thought, that is incredible, right? And now, quite honestly, I think I looked at one of the stats this morning. There were 33,000 transactions in the last year, and there's 59,000, 60,000 agents. That means that 20 some odd thousand agents didn't do a single deal. They're not, what I call them is, they're the ghost agents. They won't go to the light. They'll go to the coffee machine and tell everybody how bad the markets are going to be.
Even with those numbers, I've always been curious, and I've even asked Trev about it, and they don't know. Is of that, say 20,000 who don't do a deal, how many are trying to do a deal?
Well, I think they're all trying. Well, let's take up the team.
I'm one of that 20,000.
Yeah. Right? Okay. So let's do this, and this is what I say. Yeah. No, and I said, and I think that's valid because it doesn't take into account teams. It doesn't take into account appraisers. It doesn't take account. But so give that 5,000 people, which I think is more than generous. Yeah. And you still have a tremendous amount of people failing in the industry. And you're looking at, when someone can do 100,000 of gross income and they're like in the top 10% of the industry.
Yeah.
Well, what are the other 90% doing?
Yeah, so just because 100,000 gross is not actually like take home that great usually.
No, regardless of the model that you're in,
Yeah.
that just ensures you can stay in the business another year or two.
Yeah.
That doesn't buy you longevity in this business.
Yeah, it's always and I think that's one that consumers struggle with because if they hear an agent made 100,000, they don't realize what that actually means. They equate it to like 100,000
Yeah,
salary.
that's a common mistake.
Yeah, it happens quite a bit. Like, what are you, like for Better Homes and Garden? Like, when you want to attract agents to you, like, what efforts are you putting on the recruiting front? Like, you do much marketing, or is it more just like word of mouth and people coming to you?
We do some email marketing campaigns, and we do some, but a lot of it is word of mouth referrals. We actually had someone join us that was referred by someone else who had met with me a couple months ago, and she said, "Well, I'm not ready to go yet, but boy, do you need to go talk to Nelson." So a lot of it is word of mouth because we don't want to grow for the sake of growing. Someone once asked me, "Was how big do you want to be?" I said, "I'll grow whatever level I can to maintain the culture that we currently have." Because we're a little bit different, right? We're about 4,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet in Mississauga, but all our agents want to come in and come in fairly often. We have people waiting for office space, which I'm hearing so many people saying, well, we're cutting down on the bricks and mortar because people don't want to come in. But I think where brokers and managers need to be reminded is you have to create an environment for them to want to come in.
Yeah.
What are you doing in the office? If when your agents are in, are you closing your door and isolating yourself from the group? Are you engaging? Like I'll never forget this. I was taught by a gentleman by Bill Fields, I think, on a course once, and he said, "Manage by walking around." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he goes, "As a broker, manager, you should be getting up at least 3 times a day, walk around your office, talk to your agents, see what they need, what can you help with, see what's going on in their lives, and make them feel important." And that's something I kind of stuck with, and I do on a regular basis. It also helps me with my step count on my Fitbit. But no, but it is true because you'd be amazed. The individual struggles, the stories, as you get to a size like we are at 60 agents, and as we continue to grow, everybody's going through challenges in their life. And I think it's important that the broker be there to listen to them and to help them through it. There's illnesses, there's, sadness sometimes in people's lives, things happening, marriages, health, all of these things. And we end up becoming a sounding board, but we've got to be out there. We've got it to help them and to support them, because then you've built an office that has longevity with the agents staying there. And we're very proud of the number that stay with us and don't leave to other companies.
And do you have any like metrics you track and measure by on that front, like average length someone staying with you or anything like that? Like, are there specific metrics you're looking at as a broker?
I don't have a specific one. That's one of the, it's funny that you say that, because I think you've heard me say that over the last 2 years, that a lot of the changes in technology to the industry is going to come from the operational side now, not so much the agents. They've got their websites, they're doing their stuff on social media, they're leading their lead gen. But one thing we have lacked, and especially to what you're talking about, is keeping those metrics, having the accounting systems that are currently in there are make it very difficult to track that. So unless you're doing it manually, it becomes difficult. Although it's nice to see that now with systems like Broker Bay and Showing Time, the front desks are now much more operational and effective than they used to be. The transaction management systems, but that's still the piece that's missing. I would say probably 9 out of 10 brokerages would tell you the same thing as that accounting piece on the back end, to be able to track the numbers, specifics, and get some interesting data from there. It's all about data now.
Well, it's always what I thought too, is like the disruption that everyone keeps talking about, I actually don't think is for individual agents, it's for the brokerages. Like every disruption coming is more on that end to me. Like there'll always be a need for some form of an agent. How they're set up at a brokerage, I think, is where things could get disrupted.
I have never been more confident that you're always going to need a real estate agent, a good real estate agent.
Yes.
Okay.
You might see a culling to a degree.
Yeah. So I think you're always going to need a good real estate agent. and consumers will always be going through that of determining where. But the disruption is absolutely at the broker level, which poses, which answers a question that you asked in the beginning about, technology and the broker side. There's technology kind of lied to us, because in the 90s we were all being told how technology will lower our costs, it'll make things so much easier for you, your expenses will go down dramatically. And what we've kind of learned is it's had the opposite effect.
Yeah.
Right. Now we've got servers, we've got the cloud, we've got software systems. We've got software systems in the cloud that you're paying on a monthly basis, things that before you used to just download one time and you'd use it for 10 years. So I think that part with technology, we've kind of been lied to by technology itself, because we use far more of it now as a brokerage than we would have in the 90s, because we're trying to track those numbers and that information you're talking about.
Well, that's interesting that I was talking about, because like my company's fully remote and people are like, oh, that's great, you save on rent. I'm like, yes, but do you realize how much I'm paying for the different subscriptions we have? Like I pay more than a lot of companies pay in rent just for all the different subscriptions we have to use to do it the way we want.
Yes.
Like, even this Zoom right now has 2 different subscriptions for me to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you're doing Zoom and you're doing basic, that's still $20, $30 a month that you're going to be paying. If you add in the eCam software that you're using there, if you add in other things as you go along, your paperless systems. And we talked about margins very briefly in the beginning, and margins are tight for that broker that is customer service related to their agents. They're trying to provide as much of a slice of that of value to their agents in that, and that's being heavily competed for.
So what do you like now, because there's so many different things, like what are you mainly looking for when someone comes to you? Because I'm sure similar like us, you get a ton of companies come to pitch you of why their solutions, the best thing that's ever going to happen to your brokerage. Like what do you look at as like this is what it has to meet for me to bring that out to our agents?
I think, and we've had these conversations, even just me and you, with some of the programs you bring. What I like, before I'll talk to anyone, is I need to understand what the product is. What is it going to change in the business? Will it improve the business? How will that help my agents? And if we look at a lot of we talk about all this disruption and all these changes to the industry and consumers, yet all of the changes in the industry and the models and the technology has all been to benefit the agents. Whether it's been the different commission models across the industry, the tools that they've all been to benefit the consumers. And actually, I think one of the studies that was in the Toronto Star not too long ago, one of the professors of real estate, although I don't know how you get a degree in professor of real estate at the University of Toronto, said how surprised he was that the recent announcement of sold data being released to the public, how little effect that had impacted the models to the consumers.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, for what, 3, 4, 5 years and millions of dollars later, there was this battle going on back and forth. And here you have a gentleman who thought there would be all these models would pop off to benefit consumers. And in effect, it had the opposite thing. So if someone's pitching to me, it's like, how is that going to improve our experience? How does that help my agents? Like, for example, our Real Satisfied programs that we've been using since 2005. Now everybody uses it, but I always liked it because I thought it was the future, way before it became popular with Amazon and Google, to have consumers be able to get testimonials from their clients, for consumers to get testimonials from past clients of our agents. So that was a tool I thought in 2005 would work really well. We were the first in Canada with voice activation, and that may have been a little bit early. So
I was going to ask you how that was going.
Yeah, it's kind of fluttered right now, and I don't think the timing is going to be perfect for it. You're seeing it develop in other aspects, but you also have to, like Zoom, if we had talked about Zoom training 6 months ago, it wouldn't have been as broadly used as it is now. So I think it's not always how good the product is. It's like, where do we see that fitting in? Are we too far ahead of the curve? And I sometimes am guilty of it and have learned through the years to pull back a little bit and to say, okay, so let's see how this plays out. Are we ready for that? The survey programs have been excellent. Those help our agents and provide testimonials so they can easily access all of them. Voice, I think we're still like a little bit on the early stage of that curve. But that's not to say that that may not change. When you go driving now, you're talking to Siri, you're asking her to dial up a friend and relative. You're talking to the car now, right? This is things that, you know, have come about because of other changes.
We have Alexa in not every room of our house, but pretty close.
Yeah.
But all we almost entirely use it for is music. And
I think
timers while we cook. It's like music and timers, and that's about it right now.
Well, and I think until there's a need, right?
Yeah.
When COVID hit, there was a need for the Zoom platform, and it was the easiest to get to, the easiest to set up, almost too easy because, you know, there were problems with encryption and security, but that got dealt with, and now it's moving ahead. Wish I had bought stock in it like 6 months ago, but we couldn't have foreseen it. But those are some, it's not always about, is the product ready for the market today? It depends on what's going on in the world today. And I always am reminded, I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Chi, former president of the National Association of Realtors, in 1993, addressed the National Association with the famous Lions Coming Over the Hill speech, where he said about MLS systems, saying, hey, you know what? MLS systems are like two dogs fighting over a bone, and there's a lion coming over the hill that's going to eat both of you. So it doesn't matter who gets it. And we would have thought that from 93 to 2000, we would have seen dramatic progress with that. But technology wasn't ready. The industry wasn't ready. So, but now we're looking at Ontario, where you've now down to basically 2 or 3 MLS systems. And we don't know what the final will be with that. But now it's caught up with pricing of cost of the technology, the systems to be able to manage it, and people's desire to have that as well. So
what do you think like changes would be needed for MLS? I know there's a lot of talk about all the different things. I know Trev has like a big RFP out there. Like, what do you think needs to change with like the current MLS environment?
That'll be a difficult one to assess what that's going to be, because it'll depend on the vision and the willingness of all the players at the table. And everybody has to step to the table. And that's going to, I think now we're at a stage of, are we going to see 2 big MLS systems? Are we going to see one? What is Trev going to do with their RFP? What are the others going to do with the order system now, changing as well? It's now called It's So Real Estate. So I think, but we're moving into that direction. This is stuff that, you know, before I would have needed maybe 4 registrations with different boards to get access to this MLS between here and Niagara Falls. And now with one membership in a local board like Mississauga, you can I have access to all that data and more than we ever had before. But I don't know what the final picture is going to look like, because there's some very entrenched positions on that, and I think everybody's got the best of intention, but I think agents will be the ones who are going to have to push this with their leadership, because this has to be a response to the membership. At the end of the day, and I'm vice president of the Mississauga board, we have to be responsive to what the members want and to go where it needs to go.
So like tomorrow you're speaking at the Buzz conference, and well, I guess by the time people watch this, it won't be till the last week. You'll have spoken at the Buzz conference. But like, I know like some people, like for instance, like Mark Ferris is speaking, and he was obviously with a brand, huge agent, went off and just I don't know what officially we called it, but basically like Mark Ferris Realty or whatever the name is, like, or a Ferris team, I would guess. What do you like look at as like the value of a team that big? Because like there is this trend of a lot of these big teams transitioning just their own solo brokerage. Like, what do you think the value of for big teams is to starting their own versus staying with a brand or just like a parent brokerage?
That technology has allowed that to happen. And to a certain extent, those large teams now, like you see, like you've just identified with Marks and with other companies, they're really the old LePage models of the 70s and the 80s. They're 20, 30 people. They have splits of 50-50s, however that was set up. There would be a team leader, a manager in a location. Leads would go through that person and funnel through down to the team. And that's okay. That's, that's free enterprise. And if, but we are seeing that because technology has evolved to such a stage that consumers have an active role now in searching listings and solds and actives and all that information, they can very successfully operate. And we have some large ones in Mississauga. We have large teams all across the GTA, and they can operate very well. I think their connection with a brand then becomes is what is the brand going to provide to them? And if they're not providing, or they're not getting what they need, or worse, if they're with a brand that creates an obstacle to their success, then why be there? But brands are still recognition, but consumers have proven over and over. If you look at the standings, it's not necessarily the flag that's on the office anymore. It's more the people who operate inside that company and the leadership that's there. They're going. I'm sure that if you ask Mark or Sam McDaddy in Mississauga and others, Daryl King, they've done very well in variations of those models. So you can't say that they're not welcome and that they're not being successful, because I think they're doing very well. But there's enough for everybody, whether it's that large team that is kind of a rehash of the old style models that we used to have, or to that agent who wants to make a good living for his family and a career. There's room for both.
That's what I always found interesting. Everyone's talking about like, oh, this big move, and I'm like, but that's just the old model.
It is.
Or like I think like Remax popularized kind of these 90-10 splits, 100 whatever splits, but that just disrupted the old model that we're kind of going back to.
Yeah, it's funny that way, isn't it? When you talk about it for that way. But here's why it's interesting to watch. This was like last year. And the reason there's so much shock with that is I was on a session last year, and I'm writing stuff, and the instructor tell you who's been in the business 5 years, who's new to the business. All these hands are going up, and then they said, like, who's been in the business 10 years or longer? And I put up my hand and I'm writing, and I look up and around, and I've instantly become the old dog in the room, right? And we have a tremendous amount of agents who have not been in the business for 10 years or more, and I would say a lot less than that, and they haven't seen those models. They didn't even know they existed. They think MLS has always been this way, that we always had these websites, that all this stuff was easily available. Our brokerage has been around forever. No, it hasn't. It started in the 90s and late 90s. So
that's what I really enjoyed about like kind of the weird career arc I've had in real estate is like I've learned so much of like how it's just been like a cycle of these things going through. Like if I just stayed an agent, I probably wouldn't know a lot of this stuff. Like I feel like now I know just as much or more about the industry as a lot of my clients who actually sell in the industry now.
It's true, and it's a wonderful industry. I think sometimes we get caught up in the negativity of it, and that's kind of what caused me to get more involved in organized real estate. Because when I look back on my career, it's been a phenomenal industry to provide for me and my family, and to raise my children and to go through that. And I find in our industry, we're so ego-based, and whether it's the brands telling us to just think of ourselves, or that latest instructor that said it's all about you, it's nobody else, we've kind of become this selfish creature and just thinking of ourselves, and we never think of the greater good. So a couple of years ago, I started getting involved in organized real estate, and it's been rewarding. And I keep telling people, this is something where the collective good of getting a large group together on a board and working to make the changes, not just complaining about it on social platforms. And we've seen successful changes, pushbacks to the industry, like the land transfer tax, other things. But a lot of agents don't understand that, we should really, this is my thought, I think at some point in our career, if we have longevity in this business, we should give back to it. I learned that with Richard Silver. He's always, a very wise, and he feels the same way. And we've seen that through the years, that longevity, we should take that term as a director or work on a local board on a committee to help to give back. It's the least we can do for an industry that takes so great care of all of us.
So we're going to see you as the president of AREA anytime soon, or?
You know what? I've learned never to say never, because when you say never, things kind of happen that way. I like what we're doing out in Mississauga. I love the rebirth that we've kind of gone through there, and some of the forward thinking that we've had, like of them, you know, the connecting with another MLS system. We had a long-term relationship with Treb. They're still great partners for us. But Mississauga will always have a unique sandwich type of situation, because a lot of our clients move west. They don't move back into. So if someone's in Mississauga, they're moving out to, so we need to have access to that data. But we also need that relationship with our friends at Treb, because there's a long-standing relationship there, and they have data and information that we can both help. But we're in a kind of a unique situation sitting here. But we are a city of like 800,000 people in Mississauga, and there is that need for local representation. So you have technology at one side, MLS systems, all of that stuff, and then you have the need for a local board or representation, either in a city, town, or a region, to meet the needs that people need. When they need those sign issues dealt with by law officers, who's going to deal with it?
Now, does it make sense to keep them as separate boards, or go to like an Ontario board with like proportional representation from each area?
I think that's the discussions that we'll see in the coming months, and I think that will remain to be seen. I think it'll depend on population. I think it's important that everybody have a voice who's in organized real estate in the province of Ontario. So you have to be able to address the concerns of someone who's far away. Should we be making a decision in Mississauga for someone in North Bay? No, they know their market, so they need representation there. You know, so the question becomes is, how is that going to work out? But I think once the MLS stage kind of irons itself out, it'll be interesting to see what the board situations will iron themselves out.
Like, obviously there's a lot that goes on at board level, but like, why should like an individual agent out there selling, whether they're doing, you know, 150K or 500K a year, why should they care about like that debate?
Because it impacts their business. They're using that data. There may be tools and systems. One of the things we've done in Mississauga is come up with numerous different programs leveraging the size of our membership, to provide some value adds to our members that they can't get. And when I say members, I'm talking brokerages and agents. So it's really nice when you have an office with 400, 500, 600 agents, they can leverage certain pricing and tools that smaller offices, say under 100, can't. So with some of the tools and value adds we brought to Mississauga, that's allowed those brokerages and those agents to get, whether it's a front desk system, like a special pricing for the broker systems for front desks, whether it's websites for the agents, whether it's CRMs like Exact, Incom for the websites. They provide MoveSnap, no cost. So if you're making 150,000 and you want to use MoveSnap, for example, you're going to have to pay a monthly fee. Whereas with Mississauga board, that's included. So we've tried to make it on our board, thinking of what the future will hold. And we see a paperless environment operating there, less square footage, more Zoom experiences, online presentations. We see more tools and systems being to leverage for the agents. I see that as the future.
I'm curious on like that front of like, so for instance, you guys providing MoveSnap to your agents, because like obviously like being in the industry a lot, talking to people, not just on the show, but like offline, having a lot of these discussions, I've heard a lot of pushback from agents or brokerages, like saying that you shouldn't provide MoveSnap for the reason of that's the value add of their brokerage. So you're like, their theory is like you as a board now are competing against their brokerage.
No, we're just giving everybody an opportunity. That's the way we look at it, because to that office with 10 agents or 15 agents, they can now compete at a decent level. Like I can totally see some offices thinking like that, but the vast majority of offices aren't 500, 600, 700 people or 300 people or more. The majority of them are at a small level. And I always look at it that the board is there to support whatever the local agents and brokerages owners need. And so, yeah, there's two ways to look at it, but I think it puts everybody on a competitive level. So let's see what service levels you provide then.
Fair enough. So like all this talk about like tech and all this stuff, like what do you think, like you mentioned a bit before, like actually has the biggest impact in an agent's career?
The mentor, without a doubt. If they don't have a mentor and they have to be going to online training, to attend sessions, it's funny because someone I spoke with once, and once I explained to them that the mentor provides the foundation for the business that you need to create. Putting a roof on an unfinished house won't work. And that's where people get too carried away. They want to attend a session. There's high-level people there who have already established that they have their database, they have their CRMs, they have their online presence, they have all of that. But a lot of agents, that's where they struggle, is getting to that stage, and that's where the high failure rate comes.
So for like a new agent comes into the business looking for a mentor, like how do you recommend they go about finding one?
I think they have to sit down and ask a broker, okay, number one, where does the majority of my business is it going to come from? And the broker should be able to provide stats in his office on where the business comes from, because there's no use fishing where there's no fish. And people coming in don't know where they've got to start. So that broker has to be able to provide an example of where the business comes from, but proof of it. Not a NAR study that's done in the US, not a CREA study that goes all across Canada. If you're in the Mississauga market, you should be able to provide stats locally, and that brokerage should have it. We do for our systems for that. And then once that is established, where the business comes from, then now you build an action plan and a strategy with timelines to execute on those things, right? And it can be something as simple as selecting a CRM. It can be something as simple as creating e-blast programs. It can be, now you have to go through that, but that's one strategy. Richard Robbins always talks about you should have 3 strategies, but your first one should be the one that yields the most. And we know that database, past clients, repeat referral business is about 70 to 80% of the business. So 7 out of 10 transactions, to give the context, is going to come from that. So why is there no plan for that? Oh, and you can't just give someone who doesn't understand the industry all this information. Someone I spoke with the other day, and they came from one of our competitors, and they said, man, I have so many stacks of information at home from the company. They would give me this, they would give me all this stuff, they would show me, they would dump this on me. I have these binders that are like, 2-3 feet tall, but they would never sit down and help me to explain, how do I take that and make it part of my business?
Yeah. I'm curious, because an interesting one I've talked to with clients a lot lately, and most of them, as soon as I asked the question, had clearly never thought that much about it. And it's like, what percentage of buyers for your business come from locally versus outside the area? It's like, is that something at a brokerage level you track? Like, you sell a listing, do you know where the buyer came from geographically? Because like, for instance, I assume with Mississauga, a lot would come from Toronto, and then like a lot of sellers might move further west. Like, is that something you guys track?
We don't track so much where they come from, but we track how they came to select our agent.
Yeah.
That goes out in the survey program that we put out initially. Once conditions are firmed up, that is one of the questions we ask, but we don't typically ask where they're coming from. But the flow, even in my career in real estate, has always been from Toronto west. To very, very rarely are you going to have someone go from Mississauga to the East End. I don't know why that is, but there just seems to be a natural progression. And now Mississauga used to be that you'd come into Mississauga and you would move to the northwest part of Mississauga. Well, now it's not the case anymore. Now, if you're selling in Mississauga, they're going to Oakville, Burlington, Hamilton, And now with the new access to all the MLS data, they're going to Cambridge, they're going to Guelph, they're going to Kitchener-Waterloo. And you know what, Mississauga, because of the way it's grown, if you're in the northwest corner of Mississauga, it takes you longer to get to Cawthron Lakeshore than it will take you to get to Guelph. So, you know, it's everything's, but all of ours has always typically been west. Very rarely does it move the other way unless there's a change in jobs with the client that they're forced to move back. But otherwise, no.
Like that's one I was always been interested about because it could impact where you're marketing things, like even just like a listing, like which neighborhoods in Toronto you're more likely to market it to and different things like that. And I haven't seen like anyone tracking that at like any real level.
We've never, we're not like the US in that stage. The US does a much better job, I think, in that sense. But you got to remember, there are just NAR alone itself is 1.4 million agents.
10 times bigger.
Yeah, so it's like they're very much into the big data. They're more open source. Privacy is a little bit more broad, open than it is in Canada. So there's a lot of things that have hindered that. And as we've seen, like, you know, is there the demand for it? If there's a demand for it, it will come. We've seen that. You know, I remember late 90s, if we let out active listings, the world will end. It didn't. It kept going, right? And sold data, the same thing, which also proves one of the arguments that I said at the time. The sold data was never driven by the consumer. The sold data was driven by the companies who wanted the data, thinking that everything would change the next day. And what they found is it hasn't.
I think even the sold data thing, most people misunderstood the point, which was they thought it would just be openly available everywhere if Competition Bureau won, where it still had to be behind a password.
Yeah.
And be by like, I've met so many people who talked about it who just never actually understood what it was.
Yeah, no, and I think they struggle with it. And it's like, plus there were people who were using the sold data as a competitive advantage, in the sense they were breaking the rules and they were putting it out there, so they had a competitive advantage. But much like active listings, once that data was put out there to the public and every agent had access to providing that, all of a sudden those competitive models are struggling now to define what they do, because anybody you can farm to data and Google with sold data and all that, like everybody else now. So
yeah, it's just a feature. Like it might get you ahead for a bit, but
yeah,
that's about it. So where do you see like changes going forward for your brokerage, like from like how you help agents to just like how you recruit agents? Like obviously there's a huge period of change right now, market, who knows where it'll be, like especially once like the mortgage deferral cliff kind of comes, what happens there, no one really knows. Like what do you see changes coming?
our industry, the interesting thing is it's kind of difficult to go too far ahead, because if you get government intervention, you may have a window of a roadway that you say, okay, I can see the next 6 months, I can see things being successful, I can see there's so huge pent up demand that will continue, failing something occurring to stop that. And that could be health related with COVID, or that could be government intervention. I'm just, I've had a good laugh watching all these people try and predict the markets when we're seeing the huge demand that people are waiting for listings. Like, you know, they're selling, they're coming on the market, they're selling for higher than asking sometimes and multiple offers. And then you listen to the news and they're going, it's going to crash, it's going to get, because they're trying to apply old models to something that's never happened before. The economist model of supply and demand going up and affecting, and that just went out the window. Who would have believed that for 2 months we'd see huge unit sales drop, yet prices would hold, if not increase slightly? That goes against everything.
Well, that's where it's interesting, because like the immigration is obviously going to drop now for a little while. How does that affect prices? Because that was a huge driver, but there's still listing. Might, but then like less construction. Like, is there going to be windows where it's like, hey, for 3 months we're going to see a gap? It's back up.
I think you bring up some good points. I think interest rates will dictate this. I think unemployment rates and return to jobs will dictate this. I think immigration will have an effect on this. Will they cut it back? I think they will next year, and even Benjamin Tal predicted that with Trev. But that's next year. We're only 6 months into this year, and look at all the stuff we've gone through already, right? I think those are the factors that will affect supply and how we move forward. But I am surprised with how much interest, and I was on a call yesterday with our BHG offices in the Northeast US, and they're flying the same way. They're busy. Like, even though some of them have been locked down, going through different challenges, they can't keep inventory.
Yes.
And they've never seen it like this. So is that going to continue? How long is it going to continue? I think we're all up in the air right now, and you've got to be psychic to know where this is going to go. So I think what you do is you lead with passion and you lead forward. And here, we didn't stop during this break. We were open every day to our agents. We were close to the public. We had to be, to make sure deals were closing, agents were getting paid, that we're moving. And I think what we're going to see out of this stage, more than is it going to go up or is it going to go down, and we're already seeing it, is what leaders are stepping up to lead their agents into the markets, whatever they are going forward. How are they going to position them? How are they going to train them? How are they going to help them through the obstacles? I think leadership will be a key part to brokerages, no matter what flag is on the front door.
So what do you think agents should look for in leaders right now, mainly?
I think they have to have someone who is positive, who identifies any, and here's a good example. We had our office awards on March 10th. Yeah. And in our meeting, I brought up, at the very beginning, this COVID thing that was on the horizon and was going to impact our industry. After the meeting, I had a couple of people come up to me and say, Nelson, it's not going to affect us. It's just going to come, it's going to pass. It's not that big a deal. You shouldn't have brought it up in the meeting, right? That was the 10th on the Tuesday. By Friday, we had closed the office.
Yeah.
So we have to watch and monitor everything, because it's a fluid situation. What are the stats coming out of coronavirus? What are you doing in your office to protect your agents? What challenges will like, for example, presentations? We moved to presenting online. So is that ideal? No. But if that client wants to sell and they want to meet and have a chat and you can't meet in person, we did it online. Is your brokerage taking you in that direction? Are they helping you with the tools? Or are they just throwing them at you and say, oh, try this, try that? This is not a time to try. They need to be led, and they need to lead by people who see, and are able to adjust to the obstacles that come along the way.
Awesome. Then I just forgot my next question. I had one teed up. I got to try to remember.
Sorry.
So I'm still learning to be a good interviewer, because it's that, like, you're listening to them speak while trying to remember your next question, but then they say something that triggers a question, then you forget the one before.
You know, it's what I did when I'm interviewing and moderating. I always like to have a couple key questions up, yeah, to as fallbacks to prompt the thing, so that if that happens, you can get, like today, I'm just all about smile, positive.
Yeah. I had tried that with a few, and I found, like, looking back at, like, what I deemed good interviews is the ones where, like, I came prepared with questions and had them were the ones that actually went the worst. Like,
well, I wouldn't say prepared, but there's something. Tell me a little bit about yourself. How do you find this? I think it's always good. I always have, when I'm interviewing agents or doing calls, that first call with that agent who's expressed some interest in joining, I always have a couple there, so that if I get lost, it's just, well, tell me a little bit about this. How are you doing that? Tell me a little bit about that. And it's always a good one to kind of get us back on track.
Yeah. Like, how long generally would you look at, like, an agent reaches out to you initially? Like, do you have, like, an average lead time until they would join you?
Typically, experienced agents can take 1 year to 2 years.
Yeah.
On that, 20 something calls, contacts, meetings. all of that, because they may not be happy, but they may not be ready to make a move yet, and then they get frustrated at some point. Newer agents can make that decision, or if they're frustrated in the sense that, hey, I'm stuck at this level of 3, 4, 5 deals, and nobody's helping me to get out. That agent will make that change quickly, because one thing I have learned is that time is not the friend of an agent joining this business. The longer it takes for that agent to put those deals together, those first couple deals, the higher the chance of failure, because they may be passionate. They may really want to be a real estate agent. They may do all the things, but if they can't get those deals together, then they're surviving on fumes. So it's different depending on who you're talking to and where you catch them in the cycle. And with thousands of agents, it can vary like the day.
Yeah. I was talking to a black agent the other day who was saying that they were looking at leaving their brokerage because with everything going on, they weren't feeling supported with what's going on. Like, have you seen anything at your brokerage level or talking to other agents of like how kind of this Black Lives Matters, everything that's happening, have you seen it affecting you guys at all?
We're a pretty multicultural office, and one of the things I've always been impressed with Sherry's leadership, and she's very vocal on it. And our core business values are passion, authenticity, inclusion. Mm-hmm. And Sherry is very strong in supporting minorities, giving back to the community. We're very strong supporters of the Hispanic communities, the LGBTQ communities. So we're not really, and it's funny because Sherry's position on that initially, and I don't want to speak for her, was everybody can do innovation. Innovation is a tool that anybody can have, but inclusion, allowing your people to feel that they're part of an organization, that comes from the leadership. So I make a point of when I'm interviewing anybody to say they are welcome here. And whether they're Black or brown or their religion, we're just looking for good, honest people who want to create a career, and we will help you. We don't see that. And I'm actually touched sometimes when I get my whole group together and we're all in a big meeting and everybody's there, and all the different backgrounds represented. But again, that's got to come from the top. And discrimination isn't just for one group, because you can have different groups that discriminate as well. So, but it always comes back to one common denominator: is the broker or the manager or the person in charge an inclusive person or someone who's not? So I'm proud of our brand for putting it right out there in our core business values of passion, authenticity, and inclusion, growth and excellence. But inclusion, that means a lot. And it's funny, the conversations I've had when I speak with people to stress that point out, because Sherry's always been a strong supporter of that in anything she does.
So if anyone's watching this who doesn't know Sherry Chris, she is is it CEO of Rheology or Better Homes and Gardens?
She's now what they call expansion brands, which is the two bigger expansion brands now in Rheology is Better Homes and Gardens and ERA, and she's CEO of both.
Yeah. How many brands are under Rheology?
Right now, you're looking at Better Homes and Gardens, you're looking at ERA, you're looking Century 21, you're looking Coldwell Banker, you're looking Sotheby's, and Corcoran Group. I'm not sure with Climb is still there. But Rheology is they're by far the 800-pound gorilla when you talk about brands, because to see how they operate is unbelievable.
Like, do you guys have any, like, is there any co-mingling with like you and Century 21 and Sotheby's, or you guys like act like competitors the same way you and a Remax would?
Yeah, same way as competitors. Yeah. Each has their own model, their own value propositions that they bring to the table. Certain benefits, advantages, things that we have in our connection with the magazine and the brand that others don't. Sotheby's obviously wouldn't have that. Century 21, say, they may have other benefits that we don't have that connection with. And that's really about finding what's the right fit for you.
So what's the value for like you of being Better Homes and Garden versus any one of the other brands under the same parent company?
Well, and because what you look at the tools that it brings to the agents. So the personalized magazines that we can send to clients because we're part of the magazine, no other brand can do. At the pricing and scope, the content that Better Homes and Gardens. I used to laugh when one of our competitors would always say, "Shows just like Better Homes and Gardens," and it's like, well, you could join Better Homes and Gardens now, so they stopped advertising that, right? But that diminished their brand and it raised ours, right? So there's different programs, social tools, our online learning centers. We're fortunate because the people we have leading it are some of the best. But again, I could give someone a hammer. They can build a doghouse or they can build a mansion. It's up to the person what they do with the tools. But I like the core values of the brand, especially the inclusion part. I like the tools and systems we use, understanding that that's who we are.
Now, do you think like Better Homes and Garden is going to expand a lot? Because I know it's bigger in the U.S. than it is here. Like, do you think there's going to be big like, cross Canada expansion for Better Homes and Garden?
I don't have that vision any longer, but I've kind of liked being known more as the boutique in the area, because sometimes when you have too many in an area, clients don't differentiate that you're with this office and not that office, and they had a bad experience with that office, but it's the same name.
Yeah.
Right? So I kind of like being who we are, but we could always, if it's a good brokerage, we're always happy to have more in the marketplace that think like us. But if those decisions are always made at a much higher level, and I'm glad I don't have to be involved in those decisions any longer.
Fair enough. So if anyone wants to reach out to you to ask questions or join your brokerage, how would they get a hold of you?
We're in Mississauga, right by Square One. I'm happy to talk to anybody who'd be interested in sharing our vision and working with us. The office number here is 905-896-4622. My email is Nelson, Nelson, .Goulart @ssbhg.ca. If you'd like to grow your business, you want to increase your opportunities, we'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, and stay tuned for next week when we don't have a guest book, but we'll figure out who it is before it airs. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for what you always do for the community, and Andrew, you're fantastic.
Happy to help.
Bye for now.